In this video, we're going to be talking about the exclusivity requirement in the Charities Act. And Section 1 of the Charities Act defines a charity as an institution which is established for charitable purposes only. So this is really what we mean by this exclusivity requirement, which we're going to break down in this video. Section 2 of the Charities Act defines a charitable purpose as one which falls within Section 3, subsection 1, and is for the public benefit. So let's take a look at this exclusivity requirement. Section 1 dictates that a trust is charitable only if all its purposes are charitable. In other words, each and every purpose falls within Section 3, subsection 1, and is for the public benefit under Section 2. So a charitable trust can only be charitable if all of its purposes are charitable. So a trust which has a mixture of charitable and non-charitable purposes is not a charitable trust. And so we have some key cases here, and firstly we've got Chichester Diocesan Fund and Simpson from 1944. A trust for such charitable institution or institutions or other charitable or benevolent object or objects as the trustees might select was held not to be charitable. So in this case, the trust was not limited to charitable purposes, but extended also to benevolent purposes. The court held the description benevolent purpose was broader than a charitable purpose, so the trust was seen to be aimed at both charitable and non-charitable purposes, and so could not be a charitable trust. The case of Reed Macduff said a trust for charitable or philanthropic purposes was held not to be charitable. So this was a very similar case. The trust was for charitable or philanthropic purposes, and this philanthropic purpose was held broader than a charitable purpose, so could not be a charitable trust. By contrast, we have this case of Rees Sutton. A trust for charitable and deserving objects was held to be charitable. So in contrast to these other two cases, here a trust for charitable and deserving objects was held to be charitable. And this contrast lies in the fact that the trust was for charitable and deserving objects. So the key word here is and, whereas the other two cases use the word or. And also note that this applies to more stark cases where there are more distinct purposes. So if I have a trust for the purpose of advancing policy against animal testing, and in that same trust a purpose for advancing hockey, there would be one non-charitable and one charitable purpose contained within the same trust. As not all the purposes are charitable, the trust cannot be a charitable trust. So qualifying the exclusivity requirement. So there are, however, two ways in which the demand for exclusively charitable purposes is mitigated, and the first way in which the demand is mitigated is through the doctrine of incidental purposes. So if a trust's non-charitable purpose is incidental to its main charitable purpose, the trust will be held charitable after all. So the law will treat the non-charitable purpose as if it is not a purpose of the trust at all. That is to say, it will treat the incidental non-charitable purpose as if it's not really a purpose of the trust, and therefore will be able to hold the trust exclusively charitable in compliance with Section 1 of the Charities Act 2011. In order to be incidental, the non-charitable purpose must be a byproduct of the main charitable purpose. So the incidental purpose cannot be a goal in its own right. It must simply be a byproduct of the fulfillment of the main charitable purpose. And let's take a look at some cases here. So we've got Reed Coxon from 1948. A trust aimed at funding medical charities provided that £100 of the trust fund would be used to hold a dinner for the attendees of a business meeting on the trust's governance. The trust was held charitable. So the purpose of providing a dinner was held to be a non-charitable purpose, but crucially the purpose was incidental to the main charitable purpose of the trust, to fund medical charities. Therefore, the trust was exclusively for charitable purposes in line with Section 1 of the Charities Act 2011, or the relevant common law rule at the time. And we've also got this case of Re South Place Ethical Society from 1980, an ethical society aimed at studying and disseminating ethical principles provided for members of the society to participate in social activities. The society was held to be charitable. So the main purpose was charitable, studying and disseminating ethical principles, but the purpose of providing social activities was held to not be charitable. However, the social activity purpose was held to be incidental to the main charitable purpose, so the trust was still exclusively for charitable purposes. And we've also got severance. So the court may be able to sever a fund which has a mixture of charitable and non-charitable purposes into two parts. One part comprising exclusively charitable purposes and the other part non-charitable purposes. Okay? The part comprising exclusively charitable purposes can then be a valid charitable trust. Now, severance is possible only when the trust instrument contemplates a division and the money to be applied to each part can be quantified. In the case of Salisbury and Denton from 1857, a trust was established in part to found a school or provide for the poor, the remainder to benefit the testator's relatives. The trust was severed into two parts, the first of which was a valid charitable trust. So the first half, founding a school or providing for the poor, could be severed to become a charitable trust, and the second half, to benefit the testator's relatives, was not a charitable purpose, so it was severed from the charitable part in the first half. And the money to be applied here could be quantified. So half of it was going to go to the charitable purpose, and the other half was going to go to the non-charitable purpose. Okay, that is the end of this video about the exclusivity requirement in the Charities Act, and in the next video I'm going to explain the Cypre Doctrine and how that applies in the context of charities law. If you have any questions at all about this particular video, then make sure you leave a comment below and I'll get straight back to you. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching.